So this is a boy with cladocranial dysostosis, and at 3 years of age, he was found to have a scoliosis. It was 38 degrees at that point. Initially, he was fitted with a brace. The brace at about age 10 had really not succeeded in getting him where they wanted to go. The last lateral that he had at age 10 was 2 years ago, and his curve at this point is measuring 66 degrees. And then the decision was made to put in a traditional growing rod at that point. And this was continued. He had a couple of lengthenings of the rod. But then there's a series of rather unfortunate events. These changes were occurring about the same time that Magic came out. And there was confusion on whether this child had a traditional growing rod or a Magic rod. And needless to say, the lengthening device did not work with the magnetic control. So it was only occasionally lengthened. And this is him then several years later, and his T1 to T12 length with the device in is measuring about 16 centimeters. And so the question has become really, what do you do at this stage? He is now, I think he's age 12 at this point. He is at skeletal stage 2. He had a sleep study that was done and no desaturations. One of my good colleagues over here put him in halo traction for a bit and was kind enough to call me and say, Jim, this patient has a problem, and it happened where you are, so maybe you may want to help take care of this, which was, I think that was actually very collegial to do that. So the question becomes now, what do you do? So we're only able to stretching him out to 15 centimeters. Do we go with any type of further growing instrumentation? Do we do a definitive fusion? And I'd like to kind of poll people on what you would actually do for this. Are there people here in the room who just would go, he's still physically immature, and would go, yes, you have a question?
So cladocranial kids can be of variable heights.
Yes.
So is he on the taller end of the spectrum? Is he on the shorter end of the spectrum? How proportional?
So I will show his growth charts actually on Friday for another talk that we're doing, but he is well below the 5th percentile for his height overall.
So overall, he's tiny, so proportionally his thorax will be smaller as well.
And so that sort of begs the question of what does length mean in somebody who has a skeletal dysplasia is shorter? And the whole philosophy of, does a mouse need to have the same size chest as a human to function well as an adult?
And he's barrel-chested.
And somewhat barrel-chested, yes.
Does he have fused ribs? I think you have understood.
I don't think he does. I can't tell for sure, Brian. Yes, Mike.
This is a perfect example of why our T1 to T12 height is almost meaningless, even though we publish every paper with it. If you look at the initial X-ray, there's so much kyphosis in that X-ray that,
Let me go back to this. The kyphosis is terrible, actually, yeah.
So that T1 to T12 height measured on an AP radiograph is almost not useful,
Mhm.
right? Because, and who knows if it even correlates there, but I think using that as a marker is another layer of complexity on top of the skeletal dysplasia.
Yes. Paul?
But you care more about the volume of the box, not the length of the spine, right? So it's really that height that you're caring about for their health, right?
Well, it's the height. It's not just the height. It's also the volume. And then I think that something that we really miss on this is it's actually the expansion of the chest. And so it's not just a box. It's a billows. And we're trying to create a billows here for somebody in lung function.
Those ribs look thick.
Can they billow? Or is it just going to be the diaphragm that's doing the motion for things here?
Do you have any PFTs on it?
He's not able to cooperate for PFTs. That's why we ended up with the sleep study, just to make sure there was no obstructive disease. He's not desaturating at night. Who here would, at this point, decide you're going to go with some form of growing instrumentation for him?
How old is he?
My recollection is he's...
Tribrated looks close.
No, it is. Don't even look at that. So CT scan intraoperatively as we're doing this. Every single neurocentral synchondrosis is wide open. Okay, so that I wouldn't even take any of the skeletal maturity other than maybe the hand is indicative that he hasn't, or he's just starting to go through his adolescent growth spurt right now. Paul.
Just curiously, these patients have an increased risk of serums too, so we should at some point have an MRI.
He did have an MRI. It was normal. Yes. Yeah. Stefan.
My question is, what is that series of unfortunate events
Mhm.
or growth preserving procedure, you need to think about what you're gonna do. Because if you're not coming back for the lengthening, you're gonna be stuck there.
They were actually showing up. They were attempting to lengthen the rod using the magnetic controller, but it's not a magnetically controlled growing rod. Okay? Bit of a challenge. Okay.
Jim?
Yes?
The cleidocranial, do they have a normal skull? In other words, can you put a halo on him?
He does not have a normal skull, but you can, and actually, Rob Lark put it on over there, and I think he did a very nice job of doing it. Yeah. Yes. Move on. Okay. So, made the decision not to do anything other than do the definitive fusion. And now we've got him to 17 centimeters. He's still well below the 5th percentile, so this is where we have gone. A bunch of neurosignaling changes during the operation, but ended up okay in the end of it.
Thank you. Just one question. Charlie, can you comment, because Lori is not here, but the magic number of 18 came from your institute. Does it still exist, this magic number?
Well, remember two things. The first is that the magic number applies only to patients who had severe curves and were basically fused in situ. So the 18 centimeter cutoff, all of those patients had what I would call very poor correction of their deformity. And as I will show, I think on Friday when I'm giving another talk, if you look on the graph and you look above the 18 centimeter cutoff, there are also about 5 or 6 patients up there who have reasonable FVCs. So I'd have to say that we are really quite limited in applying that 18 centimeter rule.
Greg is applauding. Okay.
Just in terms of that, we just presented our data also, I spoke to Charlie about looking at EOS scores and thoracic height in skeletal mature kids treated with EOS. And 18 was sort of the baseline. It's very consistent, 20 centimeters for idiopathic, but at 18 you started to see an increase in their EOS scores that continued to go up as thoracic height got better. So there does seem to be pretty consistently something about that, 18 to 20 centimeter thoracic height. We also tried to standardize based on arm span, which again may not really be applicable to the skeletal dysplasia kids, but 80% of the predicted height was sort of panned out with that.
Greg, before you get a whiplash, please comment, because I saw you nodding your head.
Well, I'm along the line with what Charlie said. I think we've overused vertebral length and thoracic length to predict lung function, for one thing. I think it's variable. I like the idea of using the pelvic width to at least individualize for what you might have for length. But even so, there's so many other things that go into that. I think using a single dimension and a single length to predict how somebody's going to do is really fraught with error. And I think we've made it oversimplistic as a threshold of success. So I think you and I are along the same lines. Yeah, it's a good start, but it's not sufficient.
I think the deformity control is far more important than the endless